Rachaad White speaks out about 2024 and what to expect in 2025. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And, of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, here with you every Monday through Friday, along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. We are going to dive into a delayed mailbag question as it pertains to this episode. That's coming up in a little bit, but I want to spend some time focusing on the running backs in this episode. More specifically, Rachaad White. Many of you may remember how high I was on Rachaad coming into the 2024 season and how I fully expected him to be a 1,000-yard back after he nearly hit that mark in 2023 when the Bucs were dead last in the league in rushing. Instead, it was rookie Bucky Irving that eclipsed the 1,000-yard mark and became a star last season. Sitting in the shadows as a somewhat forgotten man was Rachaad White. Well, White sat down with the RG media crew and talked a lot about that. You would think that seeing Bucky slowly take over the lead role when Rachaad had over 1,500 all-purpose yards and 9 touchdowns in 2023 would lead to some animosity, some jealousy, maybe some resentment. But that's not who Rachaad is. Instead, it only made his and Bucky's relationship that much better. I mentioned a few weeks back that Bucky Irving only had one game in the first 9 weeks with more than 10 carries, and then over the last 8 weeks, he only had one game below 10 carries, and that was because he left that game with injury. Well, Rachaad had just one game in the first 9 weeks, but below 10 carries, and he had 3 in the final 8 weeks, including a combined 9 carries in the last 3 games, but 3 games in the final 8 weeks below 10 carries. Then you move on to the playoffs against Washington. Bucky had 17 carries. Rachaad had 1. He had 3 touches in that game total. Most players entering a contract year are going to be concerned about that drop in usage, last season that Rachaad faced. And they would probably be a little frustrated knowing that it could cost them a lot of money if that trend continued into this season. Rachaad, well, all he could do was talk about how good the relationship is with Bucky. Rachaad told RG, quote, "We got our bad boys handshake and things like that we do. That's our big name for ourselves. We call each other bad boys for sure. It's been amazing. Our relationship is great. We know what we both bring to the table, but me and him, we're not one of them egos and pride backfields. We like to give credit where credit is due. A lot of the things have transpired with the rushing attack. It's a lot of things that go into it. Me and him, we like to give our whole line a lot of credit. We feel like we got a great O-line, and we all got better throughout the year together in unison," end quote. Yes, Rachaad is coming off of a season when his usage was down, but he also had a career high in yards per carry with 4.3. He had a career high in rushing success rate at 50.7%, career high in receiving success rate at 54.4%, career high in yards per touch with 5.2, career high in receiving touchdowns with 6. It was his second straight season with over 1,000 yards from scrimmage, and he did it on 140 fewer touches than he had in 2023. So Rachaad White didn't have a bad season at all. If he had as many carries as he had in 2023 with his yards per carry from last year, he would have finished with 1,169 yards. His carries from 2023 were nearly cut in half in 2024 because of the production from Bucky. So for him to have his most efficient season of his career says a lot. He wasn't getting carry after carry where he could really get into a rhythm. Instead, he became a change of pace guy. He became the guy that came in to give Bucky a breather. And most importantly, he was the blocking back. But he still managed to be on pace for his best career season. This is a prime example of what it means to be a team player. He came into the season as the RB1. He got relegated to RB2. And instead of pouting or hanging his head or demanding to be traded or causing problems, he continued to mentor Bucky and to take advantage of whatever opportunities he had. Remember, it wasn't that long ago that Rachaad was in Bucky's place. In 2022, as a rookie, White managed to get 129 carries and 50 receptions for nearly 800 total yards and 3 touchdowns while backing up Leonard Fournette. And much like Bucky in the first 9 weeks of that season, Rachaad had 0 games of 10 carries or more. In the final 8 games, he had 5 games with 10 or more carries, including a 22-carry, 105-yard performance against Seattle, which ended up being in front of the guy who would become his offensive coordinator the next season. So Rachaad has been on both sides of this scenario in just 3 years, and he's embraced it. When he was asked about his mindset going into the season, White told RG, quote, "I think my biggest thing is to attack every day, show them who I am. At the end of the day, you can only control what you can control. You have to go out there and prove it every day. I look at that in all walks of life. So I'm just going out with the mindset of just attack every day, show them who I am, and let the chips fall where they may," end quote. I love this attitude. I love this approach to the year because let me tell you, if the Bucs are going to be successful this season, they need everyone to step up. Every single player has to play their part and play their role. So when their number gets called, they have to be all in. You know as well as I do that the injury bug can strike hard and it can strike in bunches. So if Rachaad wasn't all in with this role and he was harboring ill will towards Bucky or the coaching staff or causing a divide in the locker room, and then something happens and he has to go back to being the RB1, it's really difficult to turn on a dime and get your head back on straight. We know Fournette did it in 2020. He asked to be traded or released. He had to sit down with Bruce Arians. Bruce flat out told him, we're going to need you. Trust me. Trust the process. We're going to need you. But if you want to be let go, I'll let you go. So Leonard sat down. He thought about it. Then he bought into the vision. And Playoff Lenny was born. Ronald Jones went down and Leonard Fournette became a hero in the postseason for the Buccaneers. If Rachaad wasn't buying into the vision of 2025, if he was causing problems because of the reduced role and then had to be thrown back into that lead back role, there may be players on the field that lost faith in him or lost trust in him because he was out there causing problems. That's why this approach, these things that Rachaad is saying, these moments that he's talking about, the relationship that he has with Bucky, it shows how mature he is. It shows the kind of teammate and the mentor that he is and the kind of person that he is. How much did we talk about the Bucs draft and how they draft great people who are good football players rather than questionable people that are good football players? This is another shining example. Bucs fans should appreciate this guy and hope that this isn't his final year in a Bucs uniform. I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But first, I do have a delayed mailbag question about Rachaad. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot, a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. We're down to the final four as an old-school 90s rivalry is reignited in the Eastern Conference, while the Western Conference provides two young superstars that are going to be the next faces of the NBA. No matter what, we're getting a new champion. The Oklahoma City Thunder are the favorites at minus 180, followed by the New York Knicks at plus 500, the Minnesota Timberwolves at plus 550, and then the overlooked and underrated Indiana Pacers at plus 750. New to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you're going to get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Scouting. The NFL draft is over, but the roster moves and news never stop. Hosts Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, a few weeks back, Dan DeSano reached out to me on Twitter with a mailbag question. Remember, you don't have to be an insider to send in mailbag questions. You can do it on Twitter at Locked On Bucs. The DMs are open. But it was right after the draft, and it was a great question. So I told Dan, let me keep it in my back pocket for a little bit. I'm going to circle back to it. Still have plenty of draft reaction coming out. So let's just hit the pause button. I'm not going to forget you. Well, this is the time to bring that question out because Dan asked, what kind of production do you expect from Rachaad White this season following the Bucky Irving breakout? Dan, first off, thank you for the question. Thank you for your patience. But here's how I kind of see this thing going. Last year, Bucky averaged just over 12 carries per game. Rachaad averaged 9. The Bucs as a team averaged 28.5 carries per game. So that leaves about 7.5 carries per game unaccounted for so far. Baker averaged about 3.5. So now we're down to 4 unaccounted carries. You figure there's 1 or 2 receiver runs a game, whether it's Godwin, McMillan, Shep had a couple of them. They're going to use Tez Johnson in that role. They might use Ibuka in that role. So now that leaves about 2. Maybe it's Sean Tucker. Maybe Bucky gets an extra 1 or 2 in a game. Maybe Rachaad gets another 1 or 2 in a game. But those last 2 are going to kind of be the wild cards. I think the strength of this offense is with Baker Mayfield in the passing game. The Bucs have weapons for days. They are going to throw the ball a lot. Last year, they averaged 33.5 pass attempts per game. So to be fair, it's pretty close to an even split. That's 5 more passes per game on average than rushing attempts. So the scales can tip in either direction on any given week. But the majority of the weapons are in the passing game. It is a passing league, and they just added another weapon in the pass game in the first round of the draft. All that said, I would expect Rachaad to get about the same average as last year, 9 to 10 carries per game. Not touches, but carries. I would expect Bucky's to go up a little bit, maybe 13 to 14 carries a game. Remember, this is an average, so there are going to be times the Bucky has 20 plus carries. There are going to be times that Rachaad has 4 or less carries. But I think around 170 to 180 carries for Rachaad on the season is a reasonable expectation. Then you take a look at his average. Last year was a career high of 4.3 yards per carry. His career average is 3.8. I do think this year it's going to be a little bit closer to last year's average than it is his career average. This is another season with this entire O-line together. Graham Barton is going to take another step forward in his development and his production. And this is an offensive coordinator that not only worked hand in hand with Liam Cohen last year when the Bucs were 4th in the NFL in rushing, but he also worked with Mike McDaniel, who loved running the ball down in Miami with a stable of running backs. So for the sake of this conversation, I'm going to say that I think Rachaad probably averages an even 4 yards per carry. I realize that's a little closer to his career average than last season's average, but you're also kind of splitting hairs. We're talking about a tenth of a yard, but I'm going to err a little bit on the lower side in hopes that Rachaad exceeds these expectations. So if you take that 4 yards per carry, that's going to put Rachaad around 700 yards on the ground for the season. 175 carries at 4 yards a clip, that's 700 on the nose. So if my estimation is correct in the number of carries and the average, it'll be somewhere in the range of 680 to 720 yards. The big thing that I want to remind everyone of here is it's his immeasurable importance in the pass game. And no, I do not mean his ability to catch the ball. One of the biggest parts of Rachaad's game that isn't going to show up on a stat sheet is his ability to block. So there are going to be times throughout the season that he's on the field and he's buying an extra second or two for Baker, and that is going to prove to be the difference between a sack and a first down or a touchdown. It's going to prove to be the difference between a loss and a 2-minute drill game-winning touchdown drive. So putting Rachaad's value strictly on his stat sheet isn't fair to him or to the skills that he brings to the offense, because you can't always quantify his role with a box score. I could come on here talking about the Bucs beating the Texans on Monday Night Football in week 2 because Baker led the team down the field in 80 seconds with only one timeout, and he found Cade Otton for the game-winning score. And we can celebrate and we can call Baker clutch, and the live chat's going to be jumping, and we're going to say Baker put the team on his back and all of that. But it very well could be that Rachaad White picking up a blitzer and getting a block opened up that play and gave Baker the time that Cade Otton needed to get open in the corner of the end zone for that game-winning touchdown. That is so important for this offense, to have that running back that can not only be a threat out of the backfield to catch the ball and pick up chunk yards, but to be able to stand there and get the blitzing linebacker or chip an edge rusher just enough to let Baker slide to the side and find a guy down the field, to pick up that corner that's coming in on a blitz out of the nickel spot. That's where Rachaad's value can't be quantified on a stat sheet. We all hope that Bucky is a better pass blocker this season than he was in his rookie year. That's something that I'm sure he's been working on, and he's going to continue to work on. And he's probably been picking Rachaad's brain, and he's been working with the running backs coach Skip Pete on how to get better. But I can absolutely promise you this: there are a lot, and I mean the vast majority of teams in the NFL that would kill to have a guy like Rachaad as a pass blocking running back, because what Rachaad can do in that aspect of the game, you don't see from a lot of running backs in this league, especially running backs that are legitimate 3-down backs. But to give you a final answer to your question, Dave, I think it's reasonable to expect Bucky's numbers to go up just a little bit, while Rachaad might see a slight bump in rushing production, probably similar receiving production. And we're talking about another year of over 1,000 all-purpose yards, probably 6 or 7 total touchdowns. Now, he's had 9 touchdowns in back-to-back seasons. In 2023, it was 6 rushing, 3 receiving. Last year, it was 3 rushing and 6 receiving. But unless the Bucs are going to average almost 40 points a game, then there's going to be a little regression in touchdowns for some of these guys compared to last year with the late season emergence of Jalen McMillan. Plus, you have the additions of Emeka Egbuka and Tez Johnson. Now, Johnson probably only gets 2, maybe 3. I would expect Egbuka to get 4 or 5 touchdowns. So those are going to cut into other guys' numbers. But I think Rachaad is going to be every bit as valuable as he was last year. He's going to have games where he ends up being the lead back or the top running back in a game, but he's going to have those moments where we're praising Baker, we're praising a receiver on a big catch and run, and it's going to be Rachaad that springs that play forward because of his ability to block. So I think Rachaad's going to have another really good season, but I think that's going to lead to some other questions that I'm going to talk about as I put a bow on the Rachaad conversation with an interesting tidbit. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Wrapping things up here on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. And as we wrap things up here on Rachaad White, I thought this was an interesting tweet from Greg Allman. So Allman of Fox Sports, and of course, the godfather of the Locked On Bucs podcast, he tweeted on Tuesday that the last running back that the Bucs drafted and then signed to a second contract was Doug Martin. He was drafted in the first round in 2012. Many of you remember the Bucs drafted Mark Barron earlier in the first round of that draft, and then they traded back into the first round to get Doug Martin. Well, Martin got a second contract in 2016 after having his second 1,000-yard season. Since then, the Bucs have drafted 8 running backs: Mike James, Charles Sims, Jeremy McNichols, Ronald Jones, Keyshawn Vaughn, Raymond Calais, Rachaad White, and Bucky Irving. 6 of those guys have been eligible for contracts and not received one, while White is entering a contract year. Now, this can be viewed in a couple of different ways. Number one, for as good as Jason Licht has been at drafting, he has struggled when it comes to the running back position since he's never drafted one that's gotten a second contract. Number two, he drafts one almost every year and feels that he could replicate production without having to spend a lot on running back contracts so that that money can be used elsewhere. Number three, he's been so efficient at drafting running backs on the second and third day of the draft that when it comes time for a running back to get a contract, the next guy the next guy in line has probably already overtaken the starting job. So they just go back to the draft and keep cycling through these guys. Number four, running backs have such a short shelf life that the Bucs would rather just move on to someone younger than pay a premium for someone that they already have. Now, to be fair, I think you can find truth in any one of these, and it would be really hard to argue and say that you're wrong. Now, maybe that last one is the most far-fetched because the Bucs have been one of the best teams in the NFL at rewarding their own guys. It's just odd that the running back spot is one where they continue to move on from players. If I'm being honest, I think it's a combination of the first three. Jason struggled for a long time while drafting running backs. But with that said, over the last few years, he seemed to find the right guy at the right time or the wrong time if you're the current starting running back when Jason drafts a new one, because your replacement is in the building at least a year before the team moves on from you. Ronald Jones was outstanding in 2020, and then he got hurt, lost his job to Fournette in the playoffs. 2021, Fournette was the top dog. So in 2022, Rojo left for another team and the Bucs drafted Rachaad. Rojo was a distant memory in the NFL by the time the 2022 season ended. 2023, Rachaad took over as the lead back and had a really good season, but he had no help. 2024, the Bucs draft Bucky, give Rachaad some help, and then Bucky takes the league by storm and becomes the RB1 by the end of the year. So now we enter the contract year for Rachaad, and there's no telling whether or not he's going to return. History says that this is the last year that we're going to see him in a Bucs uniform, but I think the Bucs know how good he is and how valuable he can be. They're going to want him back. Really, it's going to boil down to Rachaad. The Bucs are going to want him back, but is he going to want to come back? Is he going to be good with playing second fiddle to Bucky, or is he going to want to go somewhere where he can be the lead back? I talked about that when we were talking about Rachaad as a potential draft weekend trade candidate. He could go to the Raiders. Well, not anymore because they have Ash Genty, but he could go to the Jags. He can go to some of these other teams and probably have a larger role than he has with Tampa. So is he going to be willing to take a smaller amount in terms of money that he could probably get on the open market in order to remain in Tampa and be part of a potentially special team that has Super Bowl aspirations and Super Bowl talent? Or will more money and more playing time on a worse team be what he wants? And look, you all know me. I'm not going to fault a guy if he leaves for more money. Running backs these days don't usually last much longer than their second contract anyway. So this may be his one and only chance to really cash in. And if that means leaving for more money and setting up his family for years and years and taking care of his kids and his grandkids, then I'm happy for him. And I wish him the absolute best of luck. But don't forget, the Bucs have 19 players set to become unrestricted free agents, and they have 41 players total that'll be unrestricted, restricted, or exclusive rights free agents in 2026. There are some heavy hitters on that list. Mike Evans, Levante David, Greg Gaines, Logan Hall, Luke Gedeke, Cade Otton, Zion McCollum, Hassan Reddick. So there are going to be business decisions that have to be made. Now, Levante probably retires. Mike, if he wants to stay and keep playing, he's going to have a spot, and Jason Licht's going to figure out how to keep him in Tampa. They need to make sure that they keep Gedeke. If Riddick goes off this season and has double-digit sacks, that's going to be expensive. But the Bucs are going to need him to come back. So Rachaad may wind up a casualty regardless of the feelings on both sides. Only time is going to tell, but there is going to be interest from the team to keep him if they can, but that doesn't mean that they're going to go over their own limit that they've set in order to make it happen. It would suck to lose him. But for as much as Jason struggled with running backs early on in his career as GM, he has certainly created a string of effective backs over the last 5 or 6 years by drafting well. It also seems like every year we talk about how deep the running back class is in the draft, so they shouldn't have any problems at all finding a guy that complements Bucky if that's what they wind up doing. But I think when all the dust settles, when the season is over and we start talking about these contracts that need to be signed, these offers that need to be made, these players that need to come back, Rachaad White is going to be towards the top of the list of players that the Bucs want to keep. It's just going to be a matter of whether or not Rachaad is happy in his role with this team, and if he feels like there's an opportunity to make more money elsewhere and really be able to take care of his family over the course of the rest of his life, what is going to be most important for him? So we'll see how it all boils out, but that tweet by Allman kind of got me thinking about it. They've drafted 8 running backs since Doug Martin, and none of them have gotten a second contract. That's right up there with the quarterbacks that the Bucs have not given second contracts to. I think Kyle Trask was the second quarterback the Bucs ever drafted that got a second contract, and he's never started a game. So something about these certain positions in Tampa just don't seem to be conducive to long-term stability. We'll have to wait and see. That's going to do it for this episode. We will be back tomorrow with Evan Klosky. Plenty to talk about regarding the offensive coaches speaking with the media. And of course, we'll get Evan's reaction to Simeon Rice's press conference, his conversation with Simeon Rice, and of course, Simeon being the next inductee of the Buccaneers Ring of Honor. Until then, please make sure that you are checking out everything on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at JYarcho_Bucs. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube with the notifications turned on, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, become a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.